The scent of turpentine and old coffee was Clara's comfort, a familiar embrace within the four walls of her rented studio. Sunlight filtered through dusty panes, illuminated motes dancing in the air, catching the vibrant specks of paint that adorned her worn jeans and paint-stained hands. On the easel, a canvas glowed with the nascent forms of a dreamscape, a swirling vortex of blues and greens that promised both turmoil and serenity. This was her world, vast and boundless, far removed from the sterile, ordered existence her mother envisioned for her. Her phone buzzed, a harsh interruption. It was Eleanor, her mother. Clara sighed, bracing herself. Eleanor was an architect of considerable renown, her life a meticulously constructed edifice of success, logic, and impeccable taste. She viewed Clara's artistic pursuits with a mixture of fond exasperation and genuine concern, like one might observe a child playing with fire. Fascinating, but ultimately dangerous. "Clara, darling, I hope I'm not interrupting." Eleanor's voice, always perfectly poised, flowed through the receiver. "Just calling to let you know. I've secured an interview for you at Sterling and Finch. They're looking for junior designers. It's a fantastic firm, very stable, and you always had such an eye for spatial arrangement. Remember those dollhouses you used to decorate?" Clara closed her eyes, picturing the meticulous miniature, rooms she'd painstakingly crafted as a child. Even then, it wasn't the architecture that thrilled her, but the tiny imagined lives of the inhabitants, the stories whispered in painted wallpaper and miniature furniture. "Mom, we've talked about this. I'm painting, full-time." A delicate pause, weighty with unspoken disapproval. "Full-time, darling? And how exactly is that sustainable? Your rent, your groceries, your materials, they don't pay for themselves, do they?" Now, Sterling and Finch offers a generous starting salary, comprehensive benefits, and a clear career trajectory. You could even get your own apartment, a proper one, with central air. Clara ran a paint-smeared hand through her hair. "I'm working towards a show, Mom. The Urban Canvas exhibition next month. This piece," she gestured vaguely at her easel, "is going to be the centerpiece." "Urban Canvas," Eleanor echoed, a faint amusement in her tone. "Oh, is that the pop-up in that rather industrial part of town? Sweetheart, that's hardly the Met. You need something concrete. Something that demonstrates your intellect and your capabilities beyond expressing yourself on a piece of fabric." The casual dismissal stung. Clara knew her mother's intentions were good, rooted in a deep desire for her daughter's security and happiness. But Eleanor's definition of happiness was rigid, formed by her own triumphs in a world of blueprints and boardrooms. She couldn't comprehend the visceral joy Clara found in the act of creation, the quiet satisfaction of bringing an imagined world into being. Their conversations always followed this predictable pattern. Eleanor, the pragmatist, building logical arguments for stability. Clara, the dreamer, defending the intangible value of her art. Each interaction left Clara feeling drained, her resolve chipped away by the constant pressure to conform. In the weeks leading up to the Urban Canvas show, Clara threw herself into her work with a desperate intensity. She painted through the nights, fueled by strong coffee and a fierce need to prove not just to her mother, but to herself, that this was her path. She worked on her dreamscape. Liminal echoes, a large triptych exploring the space between waking and dreaming, memory and desire. It was complex, raw, and deeply personal. She also created smaller pieces, vibrant city scenes infused with a sense of wonder she rarely found in the waking world. Her mother's calls continued, a background hum of worry and subtle manipulation. "Your cousin, Mark, just got promoted to senior associate at his firm. He's only 30, Clara. He bought a house in the suburbs, a lovely split level. You two used to play together, didn't you? He'd be happy to give you some career advice." Or, "I saw that new gallery open downtown, very high-end. Have you considered submitting there? Perhaps your work would be more appreciated in a more established setting," Eleanor always suggested. These things with an air of helpfulness, never quite grasping that Clara wasn't aiming for established in the way her mother understood it. Clara's friends, mostly fellow artists or musicians, were her refuge. They understood the struggle, the burning passion that drove them despite financial uncertainty. Anya, her best friend and a sculptor, often reminded her, "Your mother loves you. Clara, she just loves you in her own language, and it's a language of blueprints and balance sheets. Yours is paint and poetry. It's going to take a translator." The day before the Urban Canvas opening, Clara was meticulously hanging her pieces, her stomach a flutter of nerves and anticipation. The industrial space, usually cold and echoing, had been transformed by the collective energy of the artists, filled with vibrant colors and a sense of defiant creativity. Then, the studio door opened, and there stood Eleanor, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, looking utterly out of place amidst the bohemian chaos. She carried a large, pristine white box. "Clara, darling, I thought you might need some sustenance. I brought your favorite sourdough from that artisan bakery." Clara was speechless. Her mother rarely ventured into her studio, finding it too unstructured. Eleanor surveyed the room, her gaze sweeping over the canvases, lingering on liminal echoes. Her expression was unreadable, a flicker of something Clara couldn't decipher. "It's certainly quite large," she finally said, her voice softer than usual. She walked closer to the triptych, studying the intricate brushstrokes, the subtle shifts in color. "It's about the subconscious, Mom," Clara explained, her voice low. "The dreams we carry, the unspoken feelings." Eleanor didn't respond immediately. She reached out, her finger hovering an inch from the canvas, as if afraid to disturb its fragile reality. "The colors," she murmured, more to herself than to Clara. "They're very arresting." She paused, then turned to Clara. "I suppose I always thought art was about replicating reality, not creating it." The comment was a revelation, a tiny crack in her mother's rigid worldview. It wasn't a concession, but it was an acknowledgement of a different perspective. The opening night was a blur of faces, conversations, and the low hum of appreciation. Clara, usually reserved, found herself engaging with strangers, explaining her work, sharing the stories woven into her canvases. Liminal echoes drew a crowd, its ethereal beauty captivating viewers. Among them was a stern-looking woman with an elegant scarf, who studied liminal echoes for a long time before turning to Clara. "This piece," she said, her voice authoritative but kind. "It possesses a rare emotional depth. The way you've managed to convey both the fragility and the resilience of the human spirit. It's quite profound." I run the Harrington Gallery. We specialize in contemporary art that challenges perception. I'd be very interested in discussing a solo exhibition with you. Clara's breath caught. The Harrington Gallery. It was one of the most respected, independent galleries in the city. Her dreams, wild and audacious, suddenly felt terrifyingly tangible. She glanced across the room, catching her mother's eye. Eleanor stood slightly apart, observing the scene, a faint smile playing on her lips as she listened to the woman from Harrington Gallery speak to Clara. For the first time, Clara saw not just concern in her mother's gaze, but a spark of something new, a glimmer of pride, perhaps even a nascent understanding. Later, as they walked home through the cool night air, the city lights reflecting in puddles, a comfortable silence settled between them. "The Harrington Gallery," Eleanor finally said, her voice soft. "That's quite an achievement." "Clara, Mr. Harrington is notoriously selective." "Yes, Mom," Clara replied, a warmth spreading through her. "It is." Eleanor stopped, turning to face her daughter. The streetlights cast long shadows, softening the sharp edges of her face. "I suppose," she began, her voice a little hesitant. "I suppose I always imagined your life would be a very specific kind of structure, a solid, predictable foundation." She gestured vaguely, like a well-designed building. "But your structures..." She looked back at the city, then at Clara. "They're different, more fluid, more about what's inside." It wasn't an apology, nor a complete surrender of her pragmatic ideals, but it was an acknowledgement, a tiny, precious bridge built between their two very different worlds. Clara reached out, taking her mother's hand, feeling the surprising warmth of her skin. It was a gesture of connection, a silent promise of ongoing dialogue. Back in her studio, Liminal Echoes was gone, destined for a new wall, a new audience. But the space it left behind wasn't empty. Clara looked at the fresh, blank canvas on her easel. A new inspiration stirred within her, a cityscape perhaps, but one where the buildings weren't just concrete and steel, but pulsed with the vibrant, messy, beautiful lives lived within them. Her mother might never fully walk in her world, but perhaps, just perhaps, she was finally starting to see it. And that, Clara realized, was more than enough to keep painting. The overbearing mother, a talented artist's daughter, struggles to pursue her dreams because her mother constantly criticizes her choices and pushes her towards a more stable career